The MAG271CQR is a new 27-inch 1440p 144Hz curved gaming monitor from MSI. So let's check it out and see if it's something you should consider. As mentioned, this is a 27-inch monitor with a 16:9 aspect ratio and runs at the 1440p resolution, so 2560 by 1440. It's got AMD's FreeSync too, so you'll need an AMD graphics card in order to take advantage of this. You can still use an Nvidia graphics card with it perfectly fine, but you'll still get screen tearing. Although I think it's less noticeable with higher refresh rate monitors if you can push high frame rates anyway. The panel also runs at 144Hz with a 1 millisecond MPRT response time, which makes it an excellent choice for gamers. The gray-to-gray response time isn't listed, but I don't have the tools needed to test response times. The monitor has 3 response time settings: normal, faster, and fastest. I didn't really notice a difference in the UFO test between normal and faster, while fastest did appear to reduce ghosting at the expense of adding flicker. Although I could not see this with my own eyes, it was only picked up on camera. As you may have noticed, it's also got an 1800R curve. This is a fairly noticeable curve, especially for a monitor of this size. But after using it for a while, I did start to get used to it and prefer it. Not having the corners further away was nice. It's also using a VA panel, and to me the colours look great with great viewing angles. I couldn't notice any changes even while looking at the screen on sharp angles. MSI list that it's capable of 178-degree viewing angles both vertically and horizontally. I've previously reviewed MSI's MAG271CQR, the older version of this model, so I'll also mention throughout the video how they differ. So far the specs mentioned have been the same. In terms of colour accuracy, MSI note that the panel is capable of 115% of sRGB and 90% of DCI-P3. My Spider 5 doesn't show results above 100% of sRGB and doesn't test DCI-P3. So with that in mind, I got 100% of sRGB, 79% of NTSC, and 84% of Adobe RGB. Exactly the same as the older MAG271CQR. A pretty good result for a gaming monitor in my opinion. It's got a peak brightness of 400 nits, a fair bit better than the 250 nits we got from the older MAG271CQR. With my own measurements at 100% brightness, in the center I got 396 nits. Above average brightness compared to other gaming monitors I've tested. MSI also specified that it has a 3000:1 contrast ratio, fairly high as VA panels are great for blacks. And in the center of the screen, I measured this one with a 1040:1 contrast ratio, so I'm not sure what settings you need to get 3000:1. Even if I max out the contrast setting, I can only raise it to 1090:1. Still though, it's a pretty nice result compared to some IPS ones I've tested. The bezels are fairly thin too, at around 9mm around the sides and top based on my own measurements, and then around 2.5cm down the bottom with the subtle MSI logo in the center, with the power button found down the bottom right corner. I've taken a long exposure photo in a dark room as a worst case backlight bleed test. There did appear to be a bit of bleed, which seems to be more common in curved monitors, although I could hardly notice it with my own eyes in this worst case instance, and never while actually using it normally. However, results will vary between monitors. It's not all just about the panel though. Taking a look at the rest of the monitor, it's got a matte black metal V-shaped stand. The rest of the stand is a dark grey plastic with a brushed textured finish, and it's got a hole in it for cable management. Overall, I found the stand pretty solid. Even while bumping my desk hard, the monitor didn't move much. The stand can be removed from the back of the panel by removing 2 screws with a Phillips head screwdriver. Underneath the stand mount, we get access to a 100mm VESA mount, allowing you to attach your own mount, and this is larger than the 75mm mount present in the older MAG271CQR. The rest of the back has a mixture of black matte, glossy, and brushed finishes with the MSI logo on the left and Dragon logo on the top of the stand. There's also some RGB lighting on the back, a bit of a difference to the red-only lighting on the older MAG271CQR. However, all of these new MAG models also have non-RGB counterparts, which should be a little cheaper if you prefer not to pay more for lighting. Through the on-screen display, you can only turn the RGB lighting on and off. If you want to customize it, you'll need to install the MSI Gaming app to use MSI's Mystic LightSync software. To do this, you'll need the monitor plugged into your computer with the included USB Type-B cable in order to control it. There are 10 different effects available, or you can disable the lighting if you prefer, and MSI's website does a good job of demonstrating roughly how they'll look. In a normally lit room, I couldn't actually notice the lighting. Even with my room lights off, it was still difficult to notice. You'd probably have to have your monitor right against a wall to properly see it, as I've got mine in a corner further away from the walls. It's not that bright and quite subtle, with no way of adjusting brightness. The I/O is on the back toward the bottom and faces down. On the left, there's a standard power input, so no external power brick needed here. On the right, there are two HDMI 2.0 inputs, a DisplayPort 1.2 input, 3.5mm audio output, and two USB 2.0 Type A ports. You can use the monitor as a USB hub once you connect the USB 2.0 Type B port on the far right to your computer. The USB 2.0 speeds aren't great, but at least it has a USB hub. The older MAG271C didn't have one at all, and if you're just using USB to control the monitor via software, it doesn't really matter. MSI note that both the DisplayPort and HDMI ports support 1440p at 144Hz. A little difference over the older MAG271C monitor, which only went to 120Hz with its HDMI 1.4 port, and needed DisplayPort for 144Hz. On the left-hand side of the monitor, there's a headphone holder which comes out by first pushing it in, so you can conveniently store your headphones there. Otherwise on the right, or on the left when you're sitting in front of the screen, there's a Kensington lock, and then on the opposite side there's a single joystick, which made it easy to navigate through the on-screen display when compared with your typical buttons. Rather than using this though, I highly recommend installing MSI's Gaming OSD software. Basically, after you connect the USB Type-B cable to the monitor and plug it into your computer, you'll be able to manage all of the settings through the software in Windows. It's much easier because you can just use your mouse instead of the joystick on the back. There are also some options available through the software that aren't found in the on-screen display, such as changing the RGB effects, as discussed earlier. There are quite a few built-in profiles which will change the settings to best match what you're doing. You can easily change things like brightness, contrast, sharpness, color profiles, and even pick between 6 different crosshairs to overlay onto the screen and much more. As for the included cables, you get an HDMI, DisplayPort, USB Type-B to Type-A, and power cable. Both the stand and the display together weigh in at around 5.6 kilos, although due to the awkward size, I wasn't able to test this myself. With the stand attached at maximum height, the dimensions are 61.2cm in width, 56cm in height, and 26.6cm in depth. There are only a couple of adjustments available, -5 to 20 degrees of tilt adjustment, and 0 to 130mm of height adjustment. I found that a bit more force than usual was needed to move it up and down, so you definitely don't have to worry about the panel staying in position. Unfortunately, there's no pivot or swivel available here. However, I think both of those adjustments are less useful for a curved monitor anyway. So far the monitor looks pretty good, but how was it to actually use day to day? I've used a few 1440p 144Hz gaming monitors now, and I think they're a great sweet spot for many games as long as your graphics card is able to run the resolution with decent frame rates. After getting used to the curve, I was finding that it does help in regards to immersion, and making use of FreeSync with my AMD RX 580 was icing on the cake. In my previous video on the MSI MAG271C, a lot of people asked in the comments about using the monitor with a console. While you could definitely connect this up to an Xbox One X or PS4 no problems, those consoles don't support 1440p at 144Hz. So depending on the console, the monitor would just run at a lower resolution or refresh rate. I think PS4 runs at either 1080p or 4K, while the Xbox can run at 1440p, which is downsampled 4K. But neither support 144Hz at this resolution, so you could probably save money getting a lower refresh rate panel. I've also used the monitor to edit some videos, and no problems there either. Thanks to the decent color gamut, I think it's also good enough for some content creation, at least for a gaming monitor. Personally, I still prefer my 32-inch 4K monitor for that, but if I needed one for both gaming and content creation, this would be my preferred option. For updated pricing, check the links in the description, as pricing will change over time. At the time of recording, I've been advised that the monitor will launch with a $549 Australian price tag here in Australia. or $449 in the US for my international viewers, and the non-RGB models should be around $20 to $30 cheaper. MSI also have a few other models available, including 1080p 24 and 27 inch options, as well as a larger version of this one, 32 inches with a 1440p resolution, so you've got a few options available with the new MAG series. So what did you guys think about the new MAG271CQR gaming monitor from MSI? Overall, I found it to have many nice improvements over the previous generation MAG27C. It's improving on what was already a popular monitor. Although if you've already got one, I don't think it's worth upgrading from, as it's still a good monitor. 1440p at 27 inches is a nice sweet spot in my opinion, and combined with a 144Hz refresh rate and AMD's FreeSync, it's got the makings of a great gaming monitor. Despite the 1 millisecond response time, it's MPRT rather than grey to grey, and as shown, I did notice some ghosting in the UFO test. Although as we saw, this could be improved a bit with the faster response time setting at the expense of some flicker. The curve is going to come down to personal preference. At first, when I swap to a curved monitor, it always feels a little strange. But I get used to it quickly, and when I go back to a regular monitor, I always miss the curve. There's just something about having the corners closer to you rather than further away, especially in games. Otherwise, the VA panel looked great. Good color gamut and contrast ratio were also really nice, and make it decent for content creation too. The RGB lighting was a little too dim to really be that noticeable, and the new OSD software to manage the monitor through Windows was a very convenient feature to have. Let me know what you guys thought of MSI's MAG271CQR gaming monitor down in the comments. Leave a like if you found the review useful, and of course subscribe if you want to see more tech videos like this one.